We're here to talk about things that are happening in our world, and I'm just here to learn, here to hear your perspective. I'd love for you to introduce yourself, tell everybody what you do, tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me over. So as he said, Mike Simmons, man of faith first and foremost, father of two daughters, Lauren and Rachel, who most of you probably know, who attends here, and son of a special ed teacher who has moved on years ago. But from a professional standpoint, I'm a director of talent management for Seattle Public Schools, and my side job is the president of the Mukilteo School Board. So lived here in Mukilteo for 23 years now, and glad to be here.
So I'll ask some COVID questions first. So how's the school district responded to COVID in your opinion?
So we'll talk about Mukilteo.
Yeah.
That's where I spend my time. I mean, I work in Seattle, but I think Mukilteo has done fairly well. We've got a new superintendent who started in January, and Dr. Bertelson. You go into a new job January 1, 3 months into the job, COVID-19 hits, and that was not in the training or in anything. So she's been I'll say a godsend, if you will, when it comes to change management and crisis management. So she's taken on this new role and simply continues to shine. And being the school board president, I've had a chance to partner with her on a weekly basis as we work our way through things. As a school board, the school board has one employee that it hires, and that's the superintendent. And so our job is to partner and enable her to do her job and support as she goes into this.
So with all these things going on, what do you do do you have any free time? What do you do in your free time?
Golf.
I just heard you and Morgan setting up a golf date.
Well, I told him call me anytime and we'll figure it out. But I did get a chance to golf this morning at 6 o'clock.
Where at?
And at Harbor Point, which is where I live. And had a good time. I was back home by 10:30 and starting to think about this. So, but yeah, golf and USC football when it's football season, and really just spend a lot of time walking and thinking. So,
did you go to the UW-USC game this past year?
Yeah, I went to that game. Didn't turn out so well, but at the same time, there's always this year.
That was the only game that the Huskies played well, I thought, all year, other than the bowl game against Boise State.
Yeah, but
I'll have to next time UW is playing USC here, so it'll be in 2 years.
Okay.
I'll have to have you come and sit by me. You probably have your own seats, but I'll get you right behind the UW bench.
Okay. All right. I only attend when USC's in town, so we'll make it a date.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Well, I would love to get your perspective on all of the race issues that are happening in our nation. I read the article that you did, the editorial for I think it's the Beacon.
Mukilteo Beacon.
Really appreciated your perspective there. I'll just start by asking, when you saw what happened to George Floyd and you saw that on the news, what was the first thing that went through your mind? How did you feel?
I guess the word is painful, hurt, and asking yourself, how could that happen? And as I said in the article, that it was really a statement I made at the school board. As an African American man, you ask yourself, could that be me? And the answer is yes. But the George Floyd situation was just one that we caught on camera.
Yeah.
The question is, how many others are there? And we know there are others. And it's one of those things that has grown into a groundswell of tons of energy, and not just from my community, from your community, from all communities. And I think it's one of those things where it's, as I said in the article, unity is really, really important. But at the end of the day, I will always lean on my faith.
Yeah.
And I'm one that, when you talk to friends, my favorite word is joy. And how do you find your joy every day? And the day I saw that video, my joy was kind of destroyed. And then how do you recover?
Yeah.
And recover and actually do something? And from where I sit as a father, as a black man, school board, school district, the number one question that I always ask myself is, am I doing enough? And that's the question I struggle with every day.
So where did you grow up? I know you went to school at USC. Did you grow up around LA?
No. So I grew up in Springfield, Illinois,
Okay.
and moved to LA in '79 and spent my last 2 years of high school, and then went on to USC and worked at Xerox, worked for a bank, and then moved to Puget Sound, worked for Boeing.
Oh, all right.
So I've been here, Rachel's 23, so I've been here 23 years.
So growing up, did you, I'm sure you have, did you experience racism a lot?
I would say yes, not as overt, but at the same time, you knew there were certain places that you shouldn't be at certain times. And going to middle school, if you missed the bus, you had to walk home. And there were certain routes walking home that you probably shouldn't go.
Okay.
And that was understood.
Yeah.
And, but at the same time, so much of it is, I'll use the word covert, but oftentimes it's not covert. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, what happens next? And do you challenge it? And the older you get, the more apt you are to test what just happened. And there's testing and then there's accusing. And they're very, very different. And oftentimes, from my perspective, I test by asking the tough question.
Yeah.
And asking the tough question and waiting sometimes will get you the answer. And oftentimes you already know the answer, but you have to ask the question.
So out of curiosity, when you've tested it, have you asked the question, testing to see if there might have been, I would say, covert racism involved, and you'd been wrong?
Yeah. But, my perspective is I ask the question so it doesn't accuse the person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm really trying to understand how they arrived at X decision.
Sure.
Take me through your thought process. How did you arrive with that? Let me offer a different perspective. And oftentimes it comes out where they understand me better and I understand them better. But if you take the approach where you absolutely accuse, then the natural thing is you go into defensive.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't solve anything. But it certainly is out there.
Yeah, what I'm seeing right now, as I look across America and you watch on social media, the accusing is immediately causing outrage on both sides, and it's causing intense friction, which I have found that it's complicated to unite people when there's so much outrage.
Well, I think what you have to realize is that, the George Floyd thing happened. Terrible. One of the most terrible things you can see.
Yeah.
8 minutes, 46 seconds.
It was brutal.
It's, but that's just one.
Yeah.
That was caught on that camera. While I grew up in LA, age 15, I was also working there when the Rodney King thing happened. Here again, there's not cell phones, but here again is on video. And even at that time, there were folks who believe, well, that couldn't have happened. There had to be something else. So what you're doing is saying, I don't want to believe my own eyes. And then what happens next?
Yeah.
And clearly there was unrest there too. So, it's a daunting thing. It's not going to go anywhere. If you were to invite me back a month now on July 17th and ask me, is the movement and the anger still going? The answer is going to be yes. If the answer is no, then what are we really doing as a society?
Yeah.
It appears now that society as a whole, and not just my community, but as a whole human race, is this movement of wrong is wrong regardless. And there's lots of learning to do. And so you see all the statements from the companies. all the statements from the big organizations. And when those lights go out, are the discussions and the actions still taking place? Because as we talked, it was brutal. But, and while it may not be physically brutal, well, the George Floyd thing clearly is physically brutal. But when you talk about in boardrooms, whether it be big business, education, higher education, covert decisions are still made and that are affecting people's lives.
Yeah.
So it's the Floyd thing is front and center, but there is much more going on that we have to talk about.
From your perspective, we all agree that racism is wrong, and like as a Christian, we know that it's evil and it grieves the heart of God. What are some changes that need to take place, like practically, you think, to help change this?
Well,
so what could make things a little bit better by July 17th and then by June 17th of 2021? So I did an interview with another gentleman in our church, Curleen, a couple days ago, and he was reflecting on just his experience growing up. He's 65, and he had talked about the Selma March, and then he talked about Rodney King, and he actually, went through all of his history as a black man and all the things, and he was like, every time we're coming back to the same point that there's systemic racism, things aren't changing, what do we do? So I'm curious what you think.
I think we have to talk about it. It's not something that's freely talked about. Oftentimes that burden of trying to solve this thing lies with my community.
Yeah.
Right? Oftentimes we may have to go into a room of folks that look like you and be that one person there that has to offer the solution, when actually the solution lies in the mirror. I think everyone has a personal responsibility to step back and say, what are my biases? Am I in tune with my biases? And as I make decisions, are my biases getting in the way? And to the extent that my biases are shaping and driving my decisions other than the information I should be considering, then you have to continue to step back. So I think that's one thing we have to do. I think there's such thing, our relationships now are very much on our phones, right? There is no substitute for face-to-face discussion. You can say a lot of things and hide behind that phone, texting and Facebook, but we're apt to be more cordial face-to-face.
Yeah.
And think a little harder about what we're going to say.
Yeah, people, for whatever reason, on their devices, they feel a lot braver with the things that they'll say.
Yeah, oh yeah. But I think the biggest thing as I say from a faith standpoint, is a relationship is primary.
Yeah.
And we have to nurture relationships when there's nothing going on. Therefore, when things are going on, you're more apt to have a more productive discussion. So relationship is primary, is hands down, professionally and personally, is really, really critical. And I think if we focused on that, then ask ourselves, what's my role? And back to my thing, am I doing enough?
Yeah.
So
like one of the complicated things for me in all of this is when the George Floyd situation happened, I was on a road trip with my wife on vacation. And so we're driving. So I've had lots of time just to process and think through all of this and listen to lots of news reports and blogs and podcasts and all these different things. And I really became personally convicted that I wanted myself and our church community to be part of the solution and not live in this state of, all right, I hope everything settles down, life goes back to normal in a month or two, which is, I think, partially what's happened throughout history, is that everything settles down and everybody thinks everything's back to normal, and then something terrible happens again and it causes an uprising again. And I decided I didn't want to do that this time. And I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine who was feeling similar, and he just said, we need a place, like I would say, white 40-something ministers like me, where we can just ask questions that might seem dumb about the issue of race because we really want to help and be part of the solution. So I appreciate your perspective there, because I need a place like this where I can just ask you questions and learn.
I'll tell you, like I tell most people, I'm pretty much an open book. I'm certainly not an expert by any stretch. I'm an expert at asking questions and being resourceful. But at the
You're
same
definitely an expert at being a dad.
well,
You're a great dad. Your kids are amazing.
I'll just go speechless on that one.
right.
But thank you. But I think having that space where people can ask those questions and feel, and I think I said in the article, vulnerable leadership, a term that a gentleman down in Seattle had used in a meeting, and it really applies here. Being vulnerable, and can white ministers get in a room by themselves and really have that tough discussion and be non-judgmental about it. And so there are a number of approaches that different faith communities are going after it, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think faith communities is where people are going to lean more for more leadership. Not that it's not there now, but in this time of angst, of COVID, and you have the race thing, the new normal has got two things it has to deal with: the post-COVID, and then the George Floyd and the race thing that is not going anywhere. So it's
There definitely
there's a lot
is.
to be done.
There definitely is no going back to normal.
Exactly.
The world is changed, and we're all hopeful that in the end the world is going to be better. But I think, like, as a dad too, we want to do what we can right now to leave the world better for our kids too. What is your perspective on the protests?
The protests, I think people should have the right to protest and express themselves in however way they want. I personally have not attended a protest march, but I think I'm doing my part from where I sit,
Yeah.
and everyone does their part. To the extent that they turn to where it's ill will or becomes violent and there's scuffles here, there, and everywhere, I can't support any of that.
Yeah.
I believe that 95% of the people, if not 99% of the folks that go to protests, go with every intent of being peaceful. And unfortunately, that other 1%, it goes beyond peaceful.
Yeah.
Or something triggers something. And the challenge is that many people are already on edge, and it doesn't take much to push them over edge. And so I think the protests are serving, there's a good place for protest. And needless to say, this is a good time for a protest. But certainly want them to be peaceful. And, there's certainly a point to get across. And I don't think they're going anywhere soon. There's a march in D.C. on August the 28th. That is the one protest I will go to. And I don't know if they're calling it a protest, but it is a march. I'll say, I won't use the word culmination because I don't think it will be the end, but it's a movement march, Black Lives Matter march. And so I did decide to head back to D.C. and participate in that.
August 28th. It's probably going to be 1 million people there.
I suspect so.
That
But
would be
my perspective
historic.
on that, and I waffled a little bit, was that at some point I'll have grandkids.
Yeah.
And at some point they'll read about it. And hopefully they ask me about it. And I think it's only advantageous if I'm able to say, yes, I participated in this, and this is why. So, that, plays part of my decision.
Oh, that's really good.
So
The phrase Black Lives Matter, how important do you think that phrase is?
I think the phrase is really important given everything going on now, but given everything that was going on before. And it's a phrase that has unified people, not just blacks, but everyone. And there's always the dispute of all lives matter, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, Black Lives Matter in addition to everything else too,
Yeah.
and more heightened now than before. And the George Floyd thing, it's right in your face. And for those who didn't fully understand Black Lives Matter, you can see Black Lives Matter right before your eyes in a situation that absolutely 100% did need to happen.
So what I've tried to help people with that are, I would say, people that really care, and I've tried to help them understand that when a group of 20-somethings are holding signs that say Black Lives Matter, that they're not signing up or sending money to an organization. They are literally just declaring what those three words mean, Black Lives Matter, and I think everyone should agree with those three words.
The important thing, and you're absolutely right, the important thing is it doesn't devalue other lives. It's just bringing Black Lives Matter to the forefront given everything that has gone on. But the important thing, it doesn't mean white lives don't matter or Asian lives don't matter. It's just the focus right now is on Black Lives Matter, and this is why.
Yeah.
So,
It's the number one thing I'm trying to encourage people to understand at this point. What is advice you'd give, say, church in America right now?
I would
to
say,
help the church, because the church is the one place that should be actively a part of the solution. And I think the church is struggling with what exactly we do. And I say church more universal than specifically my church.
Well, first, I think people need to get back to church, but that's a whole different discussion. But my best friend, and he's like a dad, is my uncle, who I lived with in L.A. until I got married, is an Episcopal priest.
Oh.
And he is 93, lives in Augusta, Georgia, where he retired to. And I lean on him often, more than once a week. Lean being we have these discussions all the time. And he will always say, regardless of your denomination, find some time to go to church. And you may not like the minister, but it really isn't about the minister. It's really about your faith. And
But you do like me.
Yeah.
Okay.
But from a church standpoint, the church is the one place where judgment is not the first thing that's going to happen. What you're going to find there is comfort, relationships, and hopefully help nurturing those places where you have pain. And what I try and tell folks is I go to church on Sunday to give thanks for the previous week and pick up strength for the upcoming week.
Yeah.
And so whatever the church does to do that for me, that's where churches need to step up. So
I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. And I want you to be honest, and of course you will be. In the times that you've come to our church, and obviously I see you often, how have you felt? Has our church been an inviting place for African American people from your perspective? Or are there things that we could do better?
I've known members here before I came here. Rachel, obviously, is my daughter. She's been a member here for years. But every time I've come here, I've not felt any discomfort. Obviously, there's more white folks here than black folks, but at the same time, I've never felt that someone has treated me differently because of the color of my skin. What can you do differently? I don't know. Is there more outreach you can do? Probably. I've seen folks here who look like me, who have been ushers, who have participated on stage. So there's nothing here that would lead me to believe that you're excluding anyone. And that's always what I look for, is excluding someone, but being inclusive of everyone. So, but, I think when you go to churches, whether it be all black churches, can they be more inclusive or more outreach to the white community and vice versa? So I think there's always work to be done. It's when you sit still and think that you've done everything is when you have a problem. So, I don't know.
So I'm just going to ask, personally, for me, are there suggestions that you would have for me as the pastor of things that I can do better?
Well, you tell stories really, really well. So I wouldn't change that at all. I don't know that there's anything specific. I can't say I know you that well, but I listen and I'm always learning something. And if you check my phone, I take notes in sermons. So
Okay,
I'm not on my
see
phone.
your
I take
phone.
take notes. But I think what you and all pastors have to ask themselves is, am I delivering sermons? Am I putting forth the effort to be really inclusive of all communities?
Yeah.
And is my staff representative to where I can be inclusive of all communities? It's like if you apply for a job, one of the things most people do, they go to the company website, let me see who's on that board of directors, and is there anyone who looks like me, or gender, race, and anything like that. And so you have to ask yourself, when someone comes in that door, do they see themselves on the stage, and do they see themselves in the congregation?
Yeah, that's really good.
So, and that's, to me, I think that's always a question that should be front and center. And, I think you'll be fine.
All right. The only thing that I think you and I disagree on is the USC UW thing.
Well,
I don't hold that against you.
I was going to wear a USC shirt.
I know.
And,
I thought about wearing actually
and
a UW shirt
I got
today,
some coaching at home, and Rachel says, don't wear anything with a logo. That was her advice. I was like, oh, okay. So I said, Rachel, is this okay? She says, oh, yeah, that's fine. So I'm not sure what she meant by that. Maybe it was a USC thing, or maybe not.
Maybe.
But,
I have to be honest. I would have worn my UW shirt, but it was dirty.
Oh, yeah.
So that was
as they often are on the back.
It's true. Is there any last words of advice you'd have for us? Any last things you want to say about this particular topic?
I think the most important thing is continue to have the discussion in various forums. You have your staff meetings, children's groups. How to have that discussion's a tough one. But you have to remember, you were born with no clothes on, and I was born with no clothes on. We had no feelings and knew nothing.
Yeah.
But yet people grew up with certain angers and angles and things like that, which is learned. And I think over time, people can unlearn, or at least learn what they know is not right. And how do they reach out and ask for help? And I think that's the thing that we have to continue to do. And that's everybody. And so, but at the end of the day, lean on your faith. I mean, that's what I always tell people. And oftentimes people say, well, you don't really want to say that in work. I said, well, at the end of the day, lean on your faith, whatever that may be. I'm not telling you which way to lean, but I think most people have a faith of some sort. And I don't need to know, but 9 times out of 10, your faith's not going to let you down. So, but.
Yeah. Jesus is the answer. It's always been the answer, and he'll always be the answer. Yep. I feel that way very strongly, and I'm excited to have the message of Jesus be forefront, as always.
All the time. So.
Well, Mike, thanks for your time. Yeah. Really appreciate your words of wisdom and your advice and helping us learn, and I'd love to do something like this again soon, and I definitely am going to hold you to the USC UW game.
I'll know I have it covered, but let me just share one thing. And this, I was preparing to come talk to you, and I said, okay, fine. What is the one thing? Is there a quote that may help as people continue to explore and helping themselves around the whole race issue? And had a chance to hear Angela Davis talk a few years back at the National School Board Conference. And a quote that's attributed to her, and I'll just leave you with this, is really, and not attributed, she did say this quote, that really will help people step back and really make people think. And so it reads, in a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. And there's huge meaning to that. And that's where we're trying to get, to the anti-racist society. And it's not going to happen overnight. But if we keep that front and center, along with commitment to our faith, I think we'll be fine. So,
Thank you very much.
yep, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for watching. Please share this with your friends. And again, join us in being part of the solution.